Our theory of goal setting was strictly conscious goals. And the priming, the idea of priming, which I'm going to get to in a minute, actually came from social psychology, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. We never heard of it before. And at the time, 1990, I don't even know if much priming had ever been done. I'm not positive that it's true that conscious goals deplete cognitive resources. There's a very big literature in personality and social on depletion of resources. And I've talked to a number of people about that, and I've heard secret discussions. It doesn't always replicate. And I've also read something recently on brain research. The brain, when it sees glucose depletion, sends out a signal to you that you're tired. But you're not actually as tired as you think you are. And it's a safety mechanism probably built in by evolution so that you don't go into a state of exhaustion. But there are a few studies that show when they do these depletion studies, if you give the right incentive, people are not depleted at all. They can work just as hard. And I haven't read all of that, although I'm working with a friend in Italy on a study, and I don't know what he found yet. So I'm not positive. I mean, of course, any action you do uses glucose, which your brain depends on heavily. But it doesn't mean by depleting that you in fact have a lower capacity. You may just feel like you're tired, but that doesn't mean you actually can't perform at the same level with the right incentive. Of course, everyone who works can get fatigued. Even if it's not multitasking, you can get fatigued on one task, such as writing or proofreading or weightlifting. So here's what, how many haven't heard of priming? Okay, I'll give you a little bit on it. So let's say you want to prime achievement motivation, which Alex Dakovic and I and Eden Blair were the first to do this in IO Psych. You have people unscramble sentences, and the 60% of the sentences have achievement-related words. Like, let's say, hard, try, I, butter, will. It's 5 words, one of the butter is irrelevant. You re-scramble those, and I will try hard. So that's an achievement-related scrambled, unscrambled sentence. And you give 20 of those, and 16 of them, no, 12 of them typically, are achievement words inserted, and the other 8 have silly words like tree or butterfly. There's no achievement-related words. So that's priming superliminally achievement motivation. Another way to do it is a word matrix. You've seen those in the funny sections of the paper. There are rows of letters in a cube, and you have to find selected words that can go this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, that way. And so you can do priming that way. Find the following 12 words in this word matrix, and they're all achievement-related words. So that's 2 of the ways of superliminal priming. You can also do it subliminally on a computer with a flashing word, slightly below threshold. Both methods work. Now, it's not quite true to say they produce exactly the same outcomes. I'll have a little more to say about that in a minute. And I don't know what the last statement means, because this is about the subconscious, so I don't know why that last thing was in there. So we'll skip that. So the first research was Dakovic, Locke, and Blair. So we were priming achievement motivation, and the task was brainstorming. And we got a significant effect of goals and a significant effect of priming. And it was only one interaction. If the goals were assigned were easy, priming didn't help, because the conscious goals stopped the priming from working. because they were low goals. So if you had a goal of like 4 uses for a hammer, after 4 you just stopped. Priming had no effect on you. That was the only interaction effect. Otherwise, there were 2 main effects. The goal effect was a little bit bigger. So then, from then on, we've done one other one where we try to pit conscious goals against the same goal, against its opposite subconsciously. Am I doing something wrong?
I'm trying to figure out.
We have a study that we haven't been able to get published yet, but we pitted conscious against subconscious. So conscious goal would be proofreading for speed, and the subconscious priming would be proofreading for accuracy. And and there's interesting findings of that. We did find that they kind of neutralized one another. So in that sense, they both worked, but if you put them against each other, they kind of neutralized, at least in the lab study. Shanson-Latham was at a call center. I've got to move ahead and then move back. On the left, this is a call center at a university where they're calling alumni to get money. So they get pledges, and then hopefully the pledges get mailed in. So that's the call center. So that's one of the primes he used. Another one was a picture, not sentences, not word matrix, picture of a woman racer crossing the finish line. So Shanson-Latham are using call center, and they started out using the woman racer, and it worked. They got more pledges and raised more money. And goals worked equally well. They both worked, main effects, no interaction. In Shanson-Latham 211, the next one, they extended the time span, I think, to a whole week from the initial prime, and it still was working for a whole week. And they made the supervisor blind to the study, so there was no supervisor subconscious effects, and it worked again equally well. And Latham and Piccolo, they used for the first time, they instead of the racer, for the first time they used the racer and the call center to see if there was any difference. I'll show you that in a minute. So let's go back. So I'll get back to the research. So there's been those 4 studies plus the one we haven't been able to get published. The reason Stakovic and I are having a problem is accuracy is extremely hard to prime, but speed is not. And we don't know why. And accuracy is easier to prime with a matrix than with accuracy words and sentences, and we don't know why. There's quite a few unanswered questions in the priming literature. So let's proceed to his next slide. McClellan basically...
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Referring to your previous talk, why do you define it as a goal, the implicit ones? What's, in terms of you require precise definition?
That's actually a good question, and Barge was the one who used that term because it works like a goal. Actually, as you'll see in a minute, we're not sure what it is. Is it a motive? But it works like a goal, and it directs attention based on what you're priming to a certain kind of behavior. And it has, and there's time persistence issues, there's effort issues, so there's certain similarities, but there's a certain way we're not sure what it is. I'll talk to you about the TAT stories in a minute. So McClellan, by the way, was the first, when I was in college, he was the first professor I had a course with on motivation. And didn't see him again for 40 years. came to Maryland to give a talk, introduced myself. He says, Locke, are you E.A. Locke? That's done those goal studies? And I said, yeah, that's the same guy. And he said, I've been wondering how your work connects with mine, because the TAT measure of need achievement, which is the story pictures. I said, well, I've been wondering how my work connects with yours. So we designed a dissertation with a student of mine together. This is really bizarre. So I said to David, I said, you pick the cards for the TAT story. You don't know what a TAT is? It's a picture, and you write a story about it. So I said, you pick the cards because you've been doing this your whole life. So he picks 3 cards. I said, David, isn't that sort of unreliable? He says, no, these are the best cards. Well, it turns out one of them correlated negatively with the other 2. So we got a reliability of 0.5 with these 3 stupid cards. Anyway, and then we had a goal measure, conscious goals. So goal measure was unrelated to the TAT stories. TAT stories were unrelated to one another except for 2 of the 3. TAT was unrelated to the performance of entrepreneurs, which was people who started copying firms, small copying companies. And goals were highly related to performance. And I'm going to get back to that because the AT&T studies showed something similar. So it's not quite true that conscious motivation can't be trusted. It's partly true, but not entirely true. So anyway, McClellan measured subconscious motives by the TAT, which is a picture story test. And you can score those now by computer for imagery. I think there's several dozen motives that can be scored for imagery, including achievement imagery. And you just plug the words into the computer. I guess you have to retype the stories into the computer, and it'll score it for you automatically. There's no scores necessary and no scoring reliability needed. So that's what is done now with the TAT. And he's right that the 2 kinds of measures don't correlate. So if you measure need achievement with a questionnaire, it will not correlate with a TAT. That's been shown quite a few times, including stuff that I've worked on. We did the first meta-analysis. It's funny, McClellan said the best place for achievement motivation to work is entrepreneurship. But no one had ever done a meta-analysis of the entrepreneurship. You have? Oh, did you do the same thing we did? Collins, Hanges, and Locke in Human Performance 2004.
Yeah, we replicated with
Oh, you did?
most studies.
Okay. So what you find is that, and we also had meta-analysis of questionnaire studies of need achievement. So what happened was both were valid, about 0.25, the NH stories and the self-report questionnaires, both valid at the same level of significance and unrelated to one another. So McClellan wasn't quite right, but he was right in that what you're getting in the TAT is not the same thing you're getting with the questionnaire. I don't know what you're getting in the 2 cases, but it's not the same thing. But they both work. So talk to you about the automatic word count. Oh, it has 80 categories and 100 million words it will code. So it's a neat thing if you want to use the TAT. So here are some data with TAT scores. This one, achievement motivation, the runner had the highest achievement motivation arousal on the TAT stories, and the headset, which was the control center, next best. For positive emotion, it was reversed, but they were both still higher than the control groups. Negative emotion, nothing. And I asked him before I left, what do you mean by work symbolism? And he never answered me, so I don't know what that means. So, but notice the headset had a huge effect on work imagery, whatever that was, and I don't know. Here, the control slides are tree or a car. Do we have pictures of those? Yeah, tree, car, which are neutral vis-a-vis supposedly achievement motivation.
So Ed, so the methodology is people see these pictures for like flashing?
No, you get a picture and it's right in front of you and you answer 4 questions.
As you see the picture?
Yes,
I see.
something like, who are these people, what are they doing, how did they get here, and what happened?
But then where
And
do
then,
you get?
and then, so those are the answers, and then you, I guess you retype them into the computer, and the computer scores them for different imagery. Okay? So let me go to this other slide. For tree over, so this is tree or car apparently. The runner, much bigger effect for arousing achievement motivation than the tree or a car. But then we go over to the work, which remember was so terrific, didn't work for this second study. The work member was way up here previously, now it's nothing. And another problem is if you're arousing subconscious motivation measured projectively, shouldn't the TAT story scores mediate the priming effect? So far, they don't. Hasn't been tried nearly enough, but so far they don't. So the question is, what the hell's going on? What are we arousing? If we're not arousing subconscious motives that show up in the TAT, which are exactly what we wanted to get, that don't mediate this priming effect, what the heck's going on here? I don't know. This is not a theory whose time has come. This is a methodology that needs a lot more work. This is the results of one of the earlier studies, but it's not in order. You can see the headset, which was task-specific, worked the best for the call center number of pledges, and the racer worked also better than the control group, not quite as well. So you have another problem is, what kind of specificity are you getting with your primes? What are your primes priming? Are they priming only what you want? Are they priming a lot of different things? And how specific should the primes be? We don't know the answer. And to make a further mess, dollars raised, observe the headset was great, but the racer was a flop. In fact, observe they're lower than the starting, they were starting higher, so they ended actually not as high. So that's adding to the confusion of priming. So we know priming works, but that's about all we know so far.
That's not $2.50, is it?
Oh, McCullen's view was that TAT is a good 5-cent measure of motivation. Maybe worth more than 5 cents, but it's pretty tricky. Now, let's go back to McClelland. There was a long-term study comparing subconscious and conscious, and that was the famous AT&T study by Howard and Bray, which was done when AT&T was still a monopoly phone company. And they had a lot of people working there. They did a big study, and they measured the TAT recommended by McClelland, all the measures and the use of the measures in the cards. They measured self-report questionnaires. They measured incomplete sentence, which is another kind of projective measure, and they had one goal measure: how many levels ahead do you want to get in this company? And they followed this up for 25 years. So maybe one of the longest term studies besides the Terman studies in psychology. So what did they find? The worst predictor of all was the TAT. Significant part of the time, and then it just collapsed after about 8 years. Even using McCullen's special formula, even separating the formula into its components, this was a flop. Other projective tests worked a little better. The next best was the self-report questionnaires, some standard achievement motivation questionnaires from various inventories. And by far the best predictor for 25 years was the one item, how many levels ahead do you want to get? And this is all controlling for cognitive ability. So this is a very strange finding. By the way, the goals were unrelated to any of the test scores on the other tests, as usual. So you have this bizarre thing. Now we have 3 levels. We have TAT, which is the totally subconscious. We have the self-report, which is general questionnaires. We have the goals, which is conscious and specific, and they work with different degrees, and they're unrelated to one another. They didn't have priming in AT&T. That wasn't even heard of by them. So we're faced with, to conclude here, a bunch of problems with priming. First of all, what primes what? So how come you can prime achievement motivation with sentences and the same motive with a picture of a racer, which have no overlap in content whatsoever? To make it worse than that, somebody from Europe tried to replicate the brainstorming task of Stakovic and I with German students. It wouldn't replicate. Then he sends me another study by a European where they used diagrams to promote priming, achievement priming. And they were pictures that emphasize motion, upward motion or motion that way. So you have pictures of people, you have matrix, you have sentence completion, and you have geometric diagrams, all programming the same thing. You have the TAT arousing, but it doesn't mediate the priming effect. You have the problem in what happens in, and the priming people are very militant. They have said openly, the subconscious controls your life. Everything you do. The subconscious mind is pretty much irrelevant. Now, I think, and I wrote an article of One Day in the Life of Edwin Locke, and I put it in an article we wrote, which is coming out, and I was emphasizing how many conscious decisions I had to make in one day, and how priming, when I'm seeing objects everywhere, could possibly explain how I got through the day. So to me, this is a very interesting field for research, but we have no idea what's happening. But we can have an idea, we can learn it, but it's very confusing to me as to what we don't know about priming. And think of something like priming a long-range purpose, like writing a book. Could you possibly imagine doing that without being conscious? Like you're a zombie, controlled by primes, like a picture of a book on your wall that's going to do that? It's ridiculous. So we don't know the limits of priming, we don't know how it works, we don't know what primes what, we don't know how some things are harder to prime than others. So there's many, many unanswered questions, but that makes it a really interesting field to study. Probably going to have to study the brain more to learn more about it, in this case because it is so subconscious. And so I think it's really interesting stuff because we know priming can have effects, but it's very far from a clearly established theory, and I don't follow the latest social psychology articles and what they may have discovered. There's many, many people doing this. Barge is the most famous, and he's the most militant about it. But anyway, that's all I can tell you about it. There's something here. Don't know quite what it is, but it's really interesting. So that's science at the beginning. Okay, thank you.